Good evening, Gills fans. It's the ME7 podcast time, and today I am quite clearly flying solo. Last Monday, I was joined by Dave, James, and Elliott as we looked in depth at the Gills retained and release list. Today, I'm here to solely focus on the players leaving the club in the summer, having been released. That's 12 players all in all from the senior group of players that I'm looking at today. Looking at new club for the summer, and basically going to answer where I think they could go for their next move. So should we start with the Cat? Glenn Morris is more lives in the Cat yet. He's not giving any indication that he's going to look to hang on his boots just yet. He still wants to play. And I'm going to assume that he'll be looking more towards a player coach role. He's certainly got all the right, qualities to be a great coach for goalkeepers somewhere. So where could Glenn go? He's a local boy, spent a lot of his time in the southeast, Orient and Crawley and co. I can't see him uprooting his family for any sort of new role, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of potential suitors in the southeast as well. Where he plays, has he still got the chance to play in the league? Possibly. He may be a number 2 or number 3 sort of keeper for some League Two clubs, maybe combining his duties with coaching as well. But I think mainly he'll look to drop into non-league, potentially looking at the likes of, say, Southend or Aldershot, former clubs of his, or even, looking at the likes of Ebbsfleet, who we seem to be able to offload a lot of our senior players to over the last sort of few years. It's clear that Glenn's got a lot of time left in him in terms of in football. I can't see anything sort of changing that for him. And he's got really good, aptitude towards it. And I think he'll be a really good coach somewhere. So if needed, I'm sure he can still do a job between the sticks. And I'm sure that'll be in the non-league capacity. So for me, someone like Southend, Aldershot, anyone in the sort of southeast area that can accommodate Glenn, I'm sure we'll have a really, really great coach there. And if he still needed to play the odd game, then I'm sure he'll do a great job. But for me, Southend are a pretty good bet, I reckon. The next player, Max Clark, is somebody who many will still feel that could do a job in League Two. And I think, probably Max is looking for a club further sort of, closer to home. Obviously, he's come down here. He's been with us for 3 years now. He's a Northern boy. He's part of that ex-Hull contingent along with Smith and Mackenzie. And maybe he's looking now for the next stage in his career. I'm sure he's got a sort of young family. I think that they live up north still. So I'm sure he'll be looking to relocate, having been here for so long. So where could Max go? I mean, obviously, it all depends on what clubs are looking for. Now, geographically, you would say that probably the likes of York City, maybe Rotherham, who have just come down from League One, or someone like Grimsby Town could be a good bet. But I think there's a better option here for Max, and it's only if it was to come to fruition, and that is Neil Harris at Cambridge. Neil Harris signed Max Clark for the Gills, obviously rates him enough to bring him to the club. And having just released Ben Purrington from the club at Cambridge after playing 37 times for them last season, there is a gap for a left back. And Max may not be everyone's cup of tea, but I still think he could do a job, whether it be a squad player in a League One team or a starter in a League Two team. Depends on whether Harris looks at somebody that he knows that he can rely on. Max Clark was brought in. Obviously, Scott Malone shared the role with him at the Gills for the first season that Max was here, but he's potentially still got a year in him to play at a high level. So who knows? Neil might look for him as a potential option for Cambridge in League One. But if not, Max can certainly do a job in League Two. And let's say he does find a club sort of more towards the northern reaches of the UK, I'm sure we'll be playing against him next season, and hopefully he'll get a decent reception. But for me, Cambridge is an outside bet, depending on what Neil Harris wants to do. But I think maybe League Two would be the best move for Max Clark. The next player, now probably someone actually quite similar. Conor, I think on his day could do a job in League One, but injuries have held him back somewhat since, in the last couple of years. And maybe a Conor move is a bit more of a gamble for some clubs than it would have been 12 months ago. Again, there's that talk about, you know, linking back up with Neil Harris. Obviously, Harris was a big factor in Conor coming down to the Gills on a permanent basis after a couple of loan spells that were very successful. There's talk amongst fans that, you know, he'd be a good fit for Cambridge, but Cambridge have been exceptional in defence so far this season, just gone. And don't know, would Conor get a guaranteed place in League One? Potentially not so much with Cambridge, but on his day, as we keep saying, there is a player in there and potentially our most competent defender, consistent defender when he plays. So he might feel as though he's got a job to do if he can stay fit. And the if he can stay fit is a very key sentence there. If not, other options. I know that Leyton Orient are negotiating with their captain, Dan Happ. If he doesn't sign, then maybe there's a gap there that Conor could fill, or someone like Exeter City, who have come down from League One and are regrouping ahead of a League Two campaign. Conor's got pedigree. He's a really, really good player when he's fit, and let's hope he can. And I hope that he can get 40+ games in him next season. Another player that, if he was welcome back, you know, if he came back to the Gills with a visiting side, I'm sure he'd get a really good reception, and I'm sure he'd score a goal against us as well. But yes, Conor Masterson, I think maybe Cambridge, but if not, certainly a League Two move on the cards for him. Josh Andrews. It's tough because if you look at his the model that Josh Andrews gives you is a 6'5" target man, and that would, a lot of clubs in League Two would snap your hand off for someone like that. But it's whether he's not in the same mould as the likes of your Cheeks and your Fondops and all those sort of players in League Two. And he's had a tough time with injuries. It's not been a time that he would have wanted at the club. He would have wanted to play more games, I'm sure. And, you know, when he was fit this season, to his credit, he has played more games, but he struggled for goals and consistency, and has at times been, you know, the kind of subject of a few taunts from the crowd, let's say, you know, I think they call it gallows humour and all of that sort of stuff. But Josh has struggled in front of goal. 6 goals for the club in 62 games is not a great return for a number 9, and definitely a player that leaves the club for, you know, low on confidence, and he would have hoped it had gone better differently for him. But he's still 24 years of age. He's quite young, and if he can stay fit, he may yet find that in time he gets another EFL move. Whether or not he'll get one straight away remains to be seen. His agent, you know, if he's got a good agent, he could get a decent deal somewhere. They will be aware of his injury record before this season, and you know, prior to coming to us, he was a bit stop-start with injuries. But if not, then maybe a step down to the National League would do him good. He's a Birmingham-born boy, so maybe the likes of Tamworth or Solihull Moors is a local move for him in the National League. And for me, there could be a pathway up to League Two again, or even further. But he needs to play more games. He needs to score more goals. He needs to find his game. And you know, Josh might need to go down a league to do that, and then to see where he's at. So yeah, for me, Josh Andrews has the chance to redeem himself somewhat and to, you know, get back on the EFL ladder. But I think he might need to start in the National League first of all to do so. Jonny Williams is a completely different kettle of fish from the likes of Josh Andrews, someone who's been there and done it and got the T-shirt. It's weird with Jonny Williams, because if he'd gone to Bradford like he was supposed to do before the U-turn that saw him come to us, he would have at least had a League Two promotion medal by now. Sorry, Jonny. But instead, his time in Kent has flattered to deceive a lot of the time. He's tried hard, he's worked hard, and he's been, you know, a consummate professional, but he's always going to be released at the end of this season. But Jonny's 32. He's not done yet. And truthfully, I think there's more that he can give. But again, with that thing of whether it's going to be another club in the EFL or whether it will be a National League move for him, whether he is somebody that can move to a different EFL club and have better luck remains to be seen. Obviously for him, geography is a big thing. He came down to the southeast to play for his local-ish team, being from Tunbridge. And there's not many clubs in the League Two next season, or really even this season just gone, that are in the southeast. So he's a little bit strapped for options, viable options there. So he may have to look at the likes of your Southend or Boreham Wood in the National League. I know I keep mentioning Southend, but they're a good option for somebody from around this way. I guess the issue might be there is affordability. Can National League clubs afford Jonny Williams, and would he be willing to take a pay cut to play more football? I'm sure he would do. He seems like the sort of person that would not be sort of drawn in by money. But yes, Jonny Williams as a League Two player remains to be seen. As a National League player, I'm sure he'd do fantastically well, but it's up to him and to see what sort of offers Jonny gets. Offers that the person gets might be an interesting one for Aaron Rowe, because at 25 years of age, he's still got a lot of time to, make a really good move. But the last 2 years at Gills won't have helped his development much. He's not played a lot of games, only 48 appearances in 2 seasons. That's missing all, over half the games in the season, really, if you look at, across different competitions. Also injuries, being out of favour with a couple of managers, a couple of perceived attitude issues. I'm not sure, obviously, we won't ever know the true story about those ones, but he came to us with quite, a lot of pedigree from Huddersfield, released by Huddersfield, but had a good season with Crewe before joining us. Got to a playoff final with Crewe, obviously lost out at Wembley. And he come to us and people thought he'd be a really, really good winger for us, but he just hasn't kicked on under a certain, number of managers. So what next for Aaron? Born in London, but he spent the majority of his career up north. And I wager that he'd probably go back up there again. And despite his unsuccessful move here, I reckon he'll have a good agent that will get him a move somewhere else. As I mentioned, he's only 25 years of age. We've still got time on his side. So where could he go? Doncaster, maybe, Rotherham, even a return to Crewe, all represent viable options for him across League One and League Two. As I said, I reckon he'll have a good agent. I reckon he'll get a deal somewhere else because he has got time on his side. But it's whether or not he can produce what we fail to see consistently at Priestfield for a new team. Yeah, we'll see about that one. But Aaron Rowe is one that I'm sure could get another contract in the EFL, no problem. Although there can't be said, though, for Marcus Wyllie, a different situation for Marcus altogether. On occasions, you get a player come into the EFL side from a non-league, and it just works. Vardy, Charlie Austin, both prime examples of players that came from below the National League setup, and it's worked. Vardy signed for Fleetwood at age 25, and then went on to win the Premier League with Leicester, have England caps, and is now still playing in Italy. Austin went from Poole Town to Swindon and scored a lot of goals there, had a great career, played in the Premier League and all sorts. And Wyllie, for me, is the same age now Wyllie was the same age when he joined us as Vardy was when he joined Fleetwood Town. But the same level of success hasn't happened. Yes, Gills struggle for goals, we struggle for creativity, and yes, we have rotated strikers quite a lot this season especially. But despite that, Wyllie hasn't scored enough goals. He hasn't, he's missed a few chances. He's been down the pecking order now for some time. Has just the 1 league goal for us, scored 1 goal for Ebbsfleet in a loan spell, went on to Dagenham before that and didn't score there. So for me, it's hard because, as I said, sometimes you may take a gamble and it pays off. You get somebody in from the non-league circuit who does really well and goes on to have a really good career in the league. Hard-working player, no doubt, but maybe it's not too unkind to say that the gap between the Isthmian Premier League, where he scored a bucket load of goals for Enfield Town, and the League Two is just too big of a gap, and he bypassed the entire National League altogether. And it's 3 leagues, and it is a massive gap in terms of fitness and the sort of level of football that we're playing at. So, but Marcus, I'm sure, can get another similar kind of position in the sort of non-league pyramid. Destination wise, Enfield Town, who he came from, have just come down from the National League South. That may be an option for him to return there. although maybe a National League South would do him good. There's plenty of Southern clubs in the National League South that are, you know, probably willing to take a chance on a striker that has previous experience, have scoring goals in the league below. So yes, Marcus Wyllie, all the best to him. It hasn't quite worked out here, but I'm sure he'll get a non-league role somewhere and score a bucket load of goals. Elliott Nevitt finished the season as a League Two promotion winner, but has no club. Hasn't worked out at Gills. Similar to Aaron Rowe, he was almost a League One player with Crewe. Didn't quite pan out that way. Came down to Kent, and the time he hasn't worked out how he would have wanted it to work out. The Cambridge spell, he had 16 appearances, and 15 of those were from the bench, so he hasn't really made the impact there. He didn't score a goal for them. But the summer is a clean break for Elliott Nevitt, for both Gills and Cambridge, and for himself. For me, there are 3 places that I think Elliott could end up. All of them are in League Two, because Elliott is a player who has spent the entire career before us in the Northwest, before coming to Kent. So the first option for me is Shrewsbury Town, who have just released their captain, John Marquis. And Gavin Cowan seems to like a striker that will put the effort in, and we can never really question Elliott Nevitt's effort and work rate during his time here. It was just conversion of chances. So Shrewsbury is one. Potentially a return to either Crewe, Alexandra or Tranmere Rovers, who are both former clubs of Elliott Nevitt's. Crewe have not yet released their retained list, but they have Omar Bogle there and Louis Moult, who I believe both will be leaving the club in the summer. Tranmere situation, now about an hour ago, they announced that Pete Wire will be leaving the club, and they have also announced their retained and release list. A couple of strikers on there too, and depends on the situation who they get in as their new manager. And obviously there's a bit of friction now between Tranmere's fans and the chairman, Mark Palios. But Elliott Nevitt could be a viable option for them to get a League Two striker in who has scored goals in this league before, for Tranmere and for Crewe. Not so much for us, but, you know, obviously has a second bite of the cherry up in the Northwest. Options for Nevitt, there are some viable ones that I think he'll definitely get another EFL move. So let's see where he goes. The next player is somebody who will undoubtedly not have another EFL move, and it's not really his fault. It was a strange signing, Euan Williams. He signed for us, obviously, after a trial, came from Charlton, but had no real impact over the last 2 seasons. He played 13 times in the 24-25 season and just over 100 minutes last time out. Injuries, being out of favour, being in a very sort of packed midfield area where a lot of people are vying for sort of 2 or 3 places. The thing is for Williams is that he spent 4 years at Charlton as a professional and didn't ever make a loan move. So his time at the Gills was the first move that he'd had, the first sort of senior football exposure that he'd had. To find very odd, because if you're not getting in a first team at a club, you'll try and get a loan move. So I think it did show at times. Obviously injuries were a factor, but he didn't ever seem to make an impact at Priestfield. So for me, he's one like Wyllie that will drop into National League or maybe even National League South to try and get some game time and find a pathway back to the EFL at a later date, perhaps. Now, again, probably location-wise will be a southeast sort of move for Euan Williams. So next season, National League clubs in the area include the likes of Eastleigh, maybe Hornchurch, Woking, Wealdstone, or maybe even below that, he'll go to a National League South side, so the likes of Dorkings or Horsham, Slough, or maybe one of the Kent sides in the division. Obviously, there are 3 to choose from. Obviously, four, if you include Tunbridge. So, yeah, there are options for Williams, and maybe again there's a player in there, but he needs a regular run of games. He needs a regular club. He needs regular first team men's football, and to see how he fares. But for me, it won't be in the league anytime soon. Somebody who might split opinion on his next move is Shadrach Ogie. Now, the general feeling around Shad is that when he plays well, he's an 8 or 9 out of 10. He, has a great game. He's skillful. He's strong. He's good in attack as well. And When he doesn't have a good game, though, he's got a mistake in him. And I know that all EFL players have a mistake in them, especially centre halves. We've seen it ourselves this season with even experienced players. But when Ogie makes a mistake because of his position on the pitch, it's highlighted, isn't it, when he does make an error. And unfortunately, they have led to some goals in the last couple of seasons have been, as a direct result of a Shadrach Ogie mistake. Nevertheless, he's still young at 24 and still has a lot of time to learn. And for me, that means he could have a future in the EFL, definitely. If he wants to play consistently, he may need to look at his options. I'm not saying that he's not League Two quality on his day, but he needs to find consistency and cut out the errors, because unfortunately, as a centre half, as I said, they're amplified more, because when you make an error in the back of the in the back line, it does impact you. A player, again, who spent a lot of time in the Southeast in his career, primarily, obviously, with Orient, but loan spells at Bishop Stortford and Dover and Aldershot. And maybe a return to National League could be on the cards. Could be, again, someone the likes of the Southend's or Boreham Woods in the area, or even Aldershot themselves, who have had him before. And maybe he needs to restart from National League and work his way upwards again. Having said that, if he got a League Two deal, I wouldn't be surprised. I don't think he's above that yet, and maybe that's a conversation for a few years' time. But for me, Shadrach Ogie will get a League Two or maybe a National League move. With this next player, Jake Turner, now 3 years at the club, never really held down the number one spot, with him and Glenn Norris playing, alternating on that one. So the first thing for Jake's going to be, as a keeper, I want to be number one. I want to be, top dog. I want to be, the kind of no longer sharing that role with somebody else. So for me, then he needs to pick his next move carefully, because if he finds that he's number two again somewhere else, that would put him back a little bit further. From Cheshire, and will potentially look to move back that way. Obviously come down and spent a few years in Kent, but he's a northern boy by trade. For me, I was looking at his options, and obviously he might find that he needs to drop down to the National League to play more regular football if he's not getting a club in the EFL. But also, there's a lot of northern clubs in the league that could facilitate him, but whether he will be first choice remains to be seen. For me, Rochdale, a viable option for him. They've just come back into the EFL after their promotion win over the weekend. And Rochdale last season had 3 or 4 loan keepers that they rotated during the season without anyone taking the senior role. Now, obviously, with that, it means that they'll probably be looking for a bit more consistency in 26, 27. Jake would be a good, steady, reliable option in goal for another League Two side. He's still quite young for a keeper. He's 27, so he's probably got another 10 to 12 years left in him to make his mark somewhere else. I know that Dagenham fans were saying to their, social media admin, "I'll get him back in. He was good here," but they're a National League South side now, and I think that Jake can still definitely play above that level. So for me, League Two is a good option for him. If he can find a League Two club, then great. All the best to him. But I think maybe a National League will be good for him to, definitely get that number one spot nailed down. But no, Rochdale, great option for him if he was to move back up that way. Obviously, the National League sides would look at him and go, you know what, we've got a player there that's got a lot of league experience with Gillingham over the course of the last 3 years and has the potential to grow. So all the best again to Jake. I think he could get a League Two move. And last but not least, Cirino, for me, falls into the category much like your Williams is and your Wyllie's, where he's not had an awful lot of league football experience. Obviously this season was a bit of a wild card in the summer, starting as what was potentially going to be a cover for Max Clark at left back, but hasn't really played at left back that much. And when he has, he's looked a little bit suspect. He's played left wing back, left wing, and hasn't really nailed down a spot in the team. And for me, with Cirino, it was brief glimpses of what he could do, but we need something a little bit more consistent than that. So for me, there's a player in there, but he's still very raw, still needs a lot of work. And I think for me, there has to be a National League North or maybe a National League level deal for him next, because he's still got to work his way through English football and find his best position. I think for me, I think he is still someone who potentially could probably play further forward as a left winger. But yeah, we'll just need a platform to show what he can do on a more regular basis. So for me, Cirino is somebody that could improve, or has to improve really, if he's going to get back into the EFL. But for me, he needs a lot of work, first of all, at maybe a National League North level. So I'm sure there'll be a lot of clubs looking at him, at his potential, and seeing what he can do. Well, that's it. That's my review of the 12 players that have been released by the club, the 12 senior players, I should say, that have been released by the club. Who knows what the future holds for them? Who knows what the future holds for us? You know, obviously Gills have got a lot of work to do in the summer, but for those 12 players, wish them all the best. You know, some will leave with probably a greater legacy at Priestfield than others will. And I'm sure that we'll probably see a couple of them next season and come back to us and hopefully not haunt us like some have done in the past. That's been me discussing the 12 released players and looking at where they could go in the summer. If you like the video, please like and subscribe and share. We have grown our subscribers since last time. We're slowly getting there, but I appreciate all the comments and feedback on any of the videos. Yeah, we're back soon, I'm sure, for more content over the summer. Anyone missing football yet? I know I certainly am. All the best, and up the Gills.